David was not a perfect man, but David was no hypocrite. David would write songs and give them to the priest about his own failures and sins. Do you ever consider that? Psalm 51, David confessing his sin with Bathsheba and Uriah, and he writes it and gives it to the priest and says, now let's sing this in the church. He wasn't a hypocrite. And so there was liberty in his religion and his leadership also. But Saul had no love for the Lord. So all that was left to him was rules, law, and which he enforced with a terrible cruelty. And it can fool some people because, as Paul said, it has an appearance of godliness because it's full of no, 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 no. But it's of no value in stopping the indulgence of the flesh. Such people should not be followed. Third and finally, look at Saul's pride here. The opposite of David. David was willing to act like a madman in order to stay alive, so that he didn't have to go back and perhaps have to face down his own king. But Saul embarks on this awful campaign to kill David for his own ego's sake. David hadn't done anything. He just didn't like that people liked David more than him. He was paranoid. He was full of pride. Everything was about him. Even this conversation with the soldiers wasn't about loyalty to the Lord or to the nation, but it was loyalty to me. To me. Even above my own children, you should be loyal to me. He's taking offense. He's redirecting national resources for a personal vendetta. Pride, arrogance, pompousness, whatever you want to call that. It's bad form for a leader, and nobody wants to follow somebody like that. We read about a guy like that in 3 John. Now listen, friends, if John the Apostle wrote a letter to our church, would you want to hear what was in it? Like if John the Apostle wrote a letter to Calvary Chapel Trussville, addressing all of our specific issues and encouraging us with the prophetic apostolic authority, would you want to hear that letter? I would. I mean, come on. How would you feel if you found out that John had sent that letter, that I went into my office one morning and there was a gold letter from Jesus to our church sitting on that desk, and I threw it away because a lot of stuff was in there about how I wasn't being a good pastor? How would you feel about me? You know, yeah, I don't want to say it out loud. Yeah. Well, this was going on in the book of 3 John. 3 John 9 and 10, he said, I have written something to the church, but Diotrephes, who likes to put himself first. There's a description. Stephen, full of faith in the Holy Spirit. Diotrephes, likes to put himself first. Does not acknowledge our authority. So John says, if I come, I will bring up what he is doing, talking wicked nonsense against us. And not content with that, he refuses to welcome the brothers and also stops those who want to and puts them out of the church. Diotrephes was building his own little kingdom where I'm the leader, I'm the apostle, I don't acknowledge John or Peter or Bartholomew or any of those guys, and any missionaries coming from Antioch or anywhere else are not welcome in this church. And if you think otherwise, there's the door. Pharaoh was a terrible leader because he was full of pride. He was hard-hearted. He watched his entire nation get destroyed systematically by the power of God. And he says, I don't care. I'm Pharaoh. I'm a god myself. Not even God can tell me what to do. Until eventually even his own priests, false priests, were begging him to let the people go. Ahab, the king of Israel, had a little season of his life where he tried to become all spiritual and religious and had 400 different prophets of the Lord in his court. Isn't that cool? 400 prophets. But guess what? If they didn't prophesy good things, he put them in prison. There was one good prophet named Micaiah. And King Jehoshaphat from Judah, who was a godly man, says, is there another prophet of the Lord? Because he sees these 400 guys, and one of them had like horns that he put on his head and was saying, God is going to lead us forward like a bull. And he's like, do you got anybody else? Well, yeah, there's this guy Micaiah, but I hate him because he never says anything good. That's a bad leader, right? Anytime I get bad news, off to the dungeon with you. Even if it's bad news from God. Remember King Herod Agrippa in the book of Acts? He stands up and he speaks, and the people say, this is the voice of a God and not a man. And when the Lord struck him, do you remember what he struck him with? Nobody remembers? Worms. He was eaten by worms. And I don't know if it happened just then or if God created one little worm in his belly right then. And that led to him developing the condition. Anyway, so it's a God and not a man. And God goes, oh, really? Let's see you, O divine one, get out of this. Pride. It's not becoming of a leader. Leadership is servanthood. We must be servants. I saw somebody online recently, and it drove me crazy, but it had this whole thing on like leadership, and this is an age where we got to stop thinking of leadership as servanthood. That's weak thinking. That's not manly thinking. That's weak. And it is weak thinking. And it might not be the kind of thinking that men have, but it is divine thinking. It's God's thinking, and it's what Jesus said. But it's also just practical too. If your leadership sees other people that are beneath you as an opportunity to pump you up, it becomes an opportunity for advancement and aggrandizement. You're not leading anybody. You've just got a bunch of lackeys that are there to build you up. That's a bad leader. People become tools to serve you. They're treated as nothing. You ever feel that way when somebody was leading you? Like, they really don't care about me at all. They just use me. You ever had a boss like that just ran through people and just like, we're going to work you until you can't take it anymore, and then we'll fire you, we'll bring somebody else, and we'll start the process all over again? That's not a servant leader. That's somebody who sees you here as to feed my process. And I know as people, we're attracted to people with swagger. We're attracted to people who have that pomp about them, people that are followed and admired. But wise men and women ought to reject that kind of leadership. A leadership is to be humble, to be a servant, not full of pride.